Hey everybody, this is Steve Baskis again, and welcome back to Endeavor to Connect, a Blind Endeavors Foundation podcast. Today it's just going to be a monologue. It's just going to be you and me. So, good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you are. We're going to talk about blindness and mental health, and maybe how they're connected, or maybe what I should ask is, does blindness create certain kinds of mental health? Maybe cause more negativity, or maybe a different perspective or outlook on life, a different type of awareness that could be beneficial or positive, depending on how you define things internally, how you think about things. Now, I'm not a professional. I've just got a lot of lived experience. And I know many of you already know my story, but I'll summarize for those new listeners. I served in the U.S. Army. I lost all my eyesight on the ground in Iraq in May of 2008 because of an explosion, a blast. This explosive device detonated next to our mounted patrol. We were in an armored vehicle, and it killed a good friend of mine. His name was Victor Cota. He died next to me that day, and I lost all my eyesight. Now, a lot of other things happened, but the big thing is I awoke half a world away from the battlefield, from that location in Baghdad, Iraq, in Walter Reed, on the east coast of the United States. Not far from Washington, D.C., the capital. And so, laying there in the hospital bed, I was contemplating my situation. I was really staring into nothing. I was thinking about how I was going 200 miles per hour, serving as a soldier on the ground in Iraq, helping lead operations, someone that was resourceful and capable, to someone that was broken, or at least that was my perceived, my perspective at that time and moment. I remember laying in the hospital bed and thinking, I'm staring into this deep, dark, black hole, an abyss that stretches on infinitely. That was my feeling. It's like this chasm. And if you focus too much on that, like having been sighted, the weeks, the years before, the months, and then every time, every second, every minute, every hour, every day was ticking by, and I was just staring into nothing. So I was left with either my thoughts or this focus on darkness. And so I started thinking about my future and how bleak it was, or how negative my thoughts about how I was going to live, how I was going to, just do the normal things, the normal daily things, tasks that we all have to do. Everything from cooking to cleaning to, driving, which of course you can't drive when you're blind. But these all brought really negative feelings into my life immediately. And I remember, touching my face and touching my eye patches and the tubes coming out of my neck and my arms and legs, and for draining, some of the wounds I had. I couldn't use both my hands. One hand was broken. The other whole arm was in a special cast. I felt so helpless. And that feeling, I thought, would never maybe leave, because I was reminded of how bad the situation was because people would come in and they were so quiet. You know, they didn't really have much to say. And so definitely blindness, depending on your state of mind, can really make you feel alone. It's infectious. It has this ability to, especially when it's trauma like this, you know, loss of sight due to trauma, having, you know, 20/20 or better acuity, visual acuity, and going from that to nothing is very traumatic. I often say, you know, if someone who was born blind loses their arm or leg, you know, there's so many kinds of examples, but trauma is always hard, you know, for us. And I'm hoping that this conversation, you know, talking about mental health and blindness will maybe appear again, you know, in another episode. This could be a series, you know, of conversation or discussion. And I you know, right now I'm speaking to you, just me, but I hope to bring on maybe some experts and, if anything, just some other veterans who have lost their sight and or are visually impaired and have different experiences and feelings about mental health. It's, you know, by the end of this, I hope to talk about some strategies for, you know, maintaining your overall health, mental health, physical health, strategies for dealing with things. And I'm still learning to this day. You know, it's been 17 years at the time of this recording. So let me check some notes here. You know, realizing you can't move the same or do the same, you know, execute things the same way can really be a burden, especially if you focus on it, you dwell on it. And I guess people could dwell on something their entire life. You don't really forget anything, right? I mean, we live life and we are scarred, you could say, or somehow maybe even not in such a negative statement. I could say we're positively affected as well. And those memories live within us and affect us when we recall them day to day. And just this feeling of not being able to move in the bed and just staring into nothing was deeply damaging to my psyche. And I realized this. I became conscious of this because, like I stated before, people came to my bedside and I could hear it in their tone, whether it was my family members or friends. And that actually helped me. It brought me back to reality. I was made conscious of like how because of the treatment I was receiving from people. And that made me think a little bit more deeply about my internal thoughts, the reality of being in this hospital room. And it kind of shifted my focus from staring into nothing to thinking about my thoughts more deeply, focusing more on that and how I was going to deal with everything moving ahead. You know, this haunting thought of, what am I good for now? I think that's a big one way to look at it. That's what I felt. It's like, what am I good for now? How am I ever going to live a meaningful life with this disability being broken? These physical loss and limitations, I had to come to terms with my other injuries too, not just my blindness. I had suffered sinus trauma. I'd suffered vascular nerve damage in my left arm, and all my extremities were damaged by shrapnel, by fragments of metal. But my left arm, to this day, my left arm and hand is probably one of the most serious injuries I have, and sometimes people don't even notice that I have this issue. And on top of not being able to see and only really have use of one good hand, it's quite debilitating. The fear is, if I lose another sense, my hearing, or I lose my right hand's capability or ability, where does that leave me? How am I going to deal with those mental challenges? What am I going to think of my life and my purpose if I lose those abilities? And I often think about this, and I thought about it before I lost my eyesight in Iraq, because as a soldier, you're hearing all the time, people got shot, or people sustained a blast injury, they lost a leg or an arm. So it was constantly on our minds, at least on my mind. You think about how, again, this goes back to dwelling on things. You think about who you were before you changed, and then how you have to operate without your sight. And so that could be very negative to dwell on this idea of like, well, I can't do it the way I once did. I can't live my life or execute things like others in the same way. And I think I learned that, we can live in an unconventional life. We can live we can walk a different path and accomplish maybe the same tasks or things, just in an unconventional manner or different way. I know I mentioned it, but, there was definitely this negative feeling of being trapped in my mind, trapped in my head, trapped in my own universe. I think having the ability to see the world can distract you. You can look at, the landscape, the terrain, you can watch people, you can watch cars, you can watch, color, the sunrise, whatever, the sunset, all these different things. And you can watch videos, YouTube. You can distract yourself. You can distract your thought process in your mind by visual stimuli. And when you can't, you're really focused on your thoughts, or you're focused on what you can't see. At least that's how I felt. This feeling of being very dependent, especially in the beginning, dependence, I guess, for others, for basic needs. From the very get-go, people start, in rehab and in the nurses and the doctors, they talk about regaining independence, and teaching you independence. Society is interesting because a lot of people don't interact with people with disabilities necessarily. They don't have the ability in school, when you're growing up, to see how someone like myself would learn, through Braille or through assistive technology, accessible technology. And so I find it interesting when, you might be in a very good setting, like at a blind center or a blind rehabilitation center that touches the normal hospital, and the people there, in the hospital and the surrounding area, they see and interact with people that are blind, and they learn etiquette and these different things that you only understand when you spend time with someone who's blind. And so, you're going back to like this idea of depending on people or being independent. They're trying to drive into you, you need to try to be as independent as possible. But a lot of people in society want to do everything for you because they don't understand that you can learn techniques, you can learn systems and procedures to operate a certain way. And so this challenge of teaching people, when you run into them, being a mentor, an ambassador, is very challenging. It can be negative. It can be something that people, depending on your mood and how you're feeling that day, can really create a storm internally. And you can have a lot of negativity because of the encounters with people. I often, get off an aircraft, like, I'm flying somewhere in the United States, and someone wants to force me to sit in a wheelchair. And I have my legs. I don't really understand, but this way of thinking, especially when I tell them 3 times in a row, I don't want to sit in the wheelchair. I'll walk with you. I want to walk. I just sat for 4 hours on the airplane, and people, I guess, because maybe society, and just people in general are seeking comfort or help, support. People want to be relaxed. They don't want to be stressed or. Where I like challenges and I like, fitness and these goals that push my mind and my body. And so when I'm exposed to these, or when I encounter these kinds of things, I really push back. I try to be diplomatic and I try to be kind, but people will definitely challenge you. And again, these kinds of moments, due to blindness, due to a disability like mine, challenge you to think about how to solve the problem, how to communicate better. You hope, right? You hope for these things, to communicate better, to be more patient, to be an ambassador, because, really it's just ignorance or uneducated. People are not educated, basically. They don't know that you are very capable of doing things. You just are missing your sight, your ability to see the world in front of you and move through it efficiently using your vision. I know I had a tremendous amount of anxiety early on. And anxiety, I think, lives in all of us, depending on situations in life. But there was anxiety I had never really felt about, trust and about being with strangers and people in a room, unfamiliar places. I'm sure you can imagine, you're listening to me now. If you close your eyes and you were traveling alone in an airport or in a taxi or, getting out and walking on the street somewhere, there's an absolute the fear of the unknown of people, and so that can creep into your mind and make you think in a negative way. I think it's interesting how the darkness, as I say, or blindness, can maybe influence you to stagnate. This mental stagnation or stillness, I guess, because you have no visual stimuli, it can influence people to sit still or stay home or be fearful of doing things. That was the opposite for me, Again, something I tapped into was this idea, I know what it means to move. Moving is living. Living is moving. And when you move, you feel better. You go for a walk, you get the blood flowing. That became a valuable lesson, when I was thinking through things in my mind. And I told myself I don't want to stagnate. I don't want to become a still fearful person. And I just kind of really thought back on my service. I was a soldier. I wanted to serve in hard places in the world, challenging, austere, environments where you don't know what's going on. Random things are happening, chaos, violence. So I thought about those things, my pursuit, the journey, the path that I was on. And in the moment when, after I lost my eyesight, those moments, those weeks, those months, and I started to develop different philosophies and perspectives or thought processes about how to live life and think about my predicament. Definitely, depression, hopelessness, these kinds of things, this were drifting in my mind, around in my mind. And I was trying to encourage myself. I was trying, among many other people around me, they were all encouraging me, but I was trying to encourage myself, drive myself to think positively. And when the people visited me, I didn't like the feeling of how they were speaking to me, and how, at least my interpretation of what I thought they were feeling or thinking. It's sad, I'm sorry for Steve. I'm upset, or I don't know how he's ever going to live his life. These feelings that I was, or thoughts that were unfolding in my brain, I was trying to think about them from a totally different perspective, because of how they were making me feel. Excuse me. Yeah, it's interesting. You're a fighter, you're a soldier, a warrior, and then you become a patient. Someone that relies on nurses and everybody around you to help. And it was such a huge change. I think another thing that's fascinating, that blindness, especially when you lose your sight, is this social aspect of, my friends I grew up with they grew up, we were growing together, and we were living a certain way. And I was like a certain kind of person to them. I was independent. I would show up on their doorstep, I'd drive there and meet them. And I was the type of person that would take people out to eat and drive them around in my vehicle. Everybody piled in my vehicle. And so after I lost my sight, those people, those friends, they were like deer in headlights. That effect, they didn't know how to treat me, what to say. It was very difficult. Some of my friends, everybody's a little different. Some of them were better than others, but it was. I would have to say right now, most of my friends actually are blind. My close friends are blind or visually impaired. The ones I spend the most time with. I relate with them better. They understand the challenges, the day-to-day challenges, and just what we live through in the sense of war, especially if you lost your eyesight due to the enemy combatant trying to kill you. This feeling, the social feeling of like losing friends, or the friends treating you differently or not coming around, was definitely a challenging thing. But really, I just made new friends. You find people who can mentor you, that are dealing with the same thing, but they've been living as a blind person much longer. And that helped me recover and build a whole nother social network. So now I want to talk about like the turning point, and I kind of mentioned a little bit. It's like moving is living is this mantra that I have, and I decided to latch on to these ideas of like physical movement is going to help me. It's going to help me recover. It's going to help me become stronger physically, which will make my mind stronger, my body stronger. And just the act of going to unfamiliar places or taking a journey away from your comfort zones, like away from a home or away from your hospital room, would teach me, the skills to deal with the different challenges that I would run into, when in the hallway, in the streets, in unfamiliar settings. And just over time, just like anything, you learn better strategies, better procedures, better techniques. And especially after you go through blind rehab, which I did, and you formally learn techniques from an orientation and mobility instructor. But blind rehab had its own kind of weird feeling, or this weird feeling came over me, in blind rehab. I'm like, I'm in rehab. What does this mean? Again, attaching negative things to blindness. These are all, I just want to say these are personal, really personal feelings and thoughts that sometimes I've only shared in private conversation with people. But I want to share this with the world. There's only going to be so many people that listen to this show ever. But if you are listening, I hope you can relate to what I'm feeling. And whether you're blind or not, someone that's helping someone who's blind or teaching people that are blind, or you have a family member, whatever it may be. This is just meant to give you some perspective. And like I said earlier on in this episode, hopefully I'll have some other friends and their perspective and thoughts, or an expert or both on the show here in the next few months. I think, some strategies to deal with all of these things would be, just slow movement. Take a step, pause, think about life, cherish those victories. It's, learning new skills, walking independently in unfamiliar places is a huge thing. When I think about all the different things that I've accomplished because of team effort, in the sense of physical feats, but even just the small day-to-day tasks, which are really what are the most important, is the daily tasks, because we live and breathe them, we do them every day. And if you can't find a way to feel comfortable, to be confident, it can be so detrimental or to your life and your progress forward after a traumatic change, like losing your eyesight. Accepting that you have to do things differently, is a big thing that helped me, and not just accomplish things, but just understanding that you're not going to do them exactly the same way. It'll be unconventional. It'll be different, which is so cool, because when I think about my journey, I was trying to serve in the unconventional warfare side of things in the military, special operations, special forces. And a lot of the mindset is unconventional. The tactics, the methods in which these types of soldiers work on the battlefield or in the world is unconventional compared to the conventional soldier that does everything more in a normal way, whatever normal is. But having wanted to serve in an unconventional warfare group, it was something that when I lost my eyesight and I was going through this whole process of thinking through things, I remembered that I wanted to be unconventional. And so kind of reinforced this idea like, oh, it's awesome. I live life in a different way. I have a different perspective, a different awareness, and it's unconventional. I'm accomplishing the same things as others, just in a different way. That's a strategy, I would say, that to help you think more positively, to maintain good mental health. Rehabilitation is where I started to really relearn how to live life. And it was challenging. I remember slamming my cane on the street, after trying to cross intersections and walk straight. When you walk from one corner to another corner, it was so imperative. Like, to me, it was so important to do it accurately, to do it well, because I was worried about hurting myself, like getting hit by a car. And it was so challenging. I was so upset sometimes. My O&M instructor, Michelle, I remember she would just be quiet, and listen to me. She could tell I was frustrated. I was anxious. I was nervous. And I was. I still have fear of the unknown. It's hard to shake that. But, you have all these tools, these skills that you gain that help you feel, they help you feel more prepared for the unknown. Whereas if you don't have a toolbox, you don't have any kind of skill set, and you walk into oblivion, into this dark world, you feel unprepared. So blind rehabilitation was helped reinforce these foundational skills, with O&M, orientation and mobility, moving independently with a white cane, long cane, in unfamiliar places, and learning how to use technology to find answers or to find information, on paper, printed paper, that was so impactful, so powerful. It allowed me to not rely on people, but to rely on my skills of learning technology and the skills to use the technology effectively. And it's still, I'm still a work in progress, I think I'll leave it there, I hope to bring another person on, like I've mentioned now a couple times, whether it's a professional or a friend or a stranger dealing with blindness or visual impairment. And I'd like to ask them, about mental health and blindness and how they're connected or not, and what strategies do they use, or how did they think about the challenges that they faced, and how did they rebuild their life. So until next time, just make sure you share the episode with your friends, family, strangers on social media, and make sure to subscribe. But I appreciate you being here and listening to what I have to say. This is Steve Baskis signing off.